Kia ora, good morning, everyone, and welcome to day 4 of our 5-day mini Not an MBA series. You have done so well. For those of you who are tuning in for the 4th day in a row, I'm looking at you, Stefan, already in the comments saying good morning to everyone. Thank you so much for coming along each day. I've got a lot out of this, and I'm really hoping that you have too. Now, it is a miserable, rainy day here in Wellington, and honestly, I'm kind of into that. So, when it's sunny, I don't know about you guys, when it's sunny, I get the guilt, So, when it's a nice day outside, I'm like, I really should wash the sheets today, and I really should be getting into the garden, and I really should get outside and make the most of it. But when it's raining, I get this lovely, guilty sort of permission where I'm like, wow, it's raining, really can't do anything. I'm just going to have to sit down with a book because what else can I do? Big fan of the rain. One of the most exciting features of my lounge is that we have a window seat with a big cushion in it. And so you can sit up in the window seat with the heat pump on and a blanket and be all cozy and look out at how miserable it is outside and watch the rain. And there's something about that. It's the same thing as lying in bed and listening to rain on the roof, like, well, the rest of the world's munted, but I'm happy here. So my plans for today, not going to lie, involve getting in that window seat with a book. Now, obviously, we've been talking this week about my book, You Don't Need an MBA, but I'm really keen to hear from all of you in the comments what you've been reading that isn't something I've written. Now, I mentioned last week, if you were on the Live and Lockdown Strategic Life series last week, that I've got a bit of a challenge for the rest of the year. I'm not allowed to read any business books because I just overdosed on them. And I'm not really allowed to read any self-development either, which is tough. This is tough. These are things that I want to read all the time. So I've been reading fiction, and so a lot of novels, a lot of essays, a lot of nonfiction that's unrelated to business or self-development, although the world's connected, everyone. We learned that yesterday, so everything is, isn't it? Anyway, I started reading a book this week that I'm super excited about, and it's called Wonderworks, and it's tracing the invention of literature and the idea that literature itself is a social technology that's invented all of these important devices that are useful for individuals and for communities to understand the world and to relate to it differently. So it goes all the way back to the first ever story told, and then traces through history, from Greek tragedy to Aristotle philosophy, right through to the invention of the apology or the invention of perspective. And it's just so good. So if that's the sort of thing that you're listening to me say going, oh my God, that sounds great, absolutely get a copy of Wonderworks. If you just listened to that whole spiel and thought, you utter nerd, that sounds so boring, don't read it. But you might want to read, Sarah's recommending The Madness of Crowds by Douglas Murray. Love to hear a bit more about what that's about. That is very cool. Love to see what you all are reading. Stefan is reading my book. That's awesome. This will make this whole series super relevant to you. That is fantastic. I love that. I've also been reading on the fiction front a lot of Matt Haig recently. So The Midnight Library, The Humans. Oh, he is so good. I'm so into him. I'm very, very excited because my favourite novelist, Jonathan Franzen, is finally releasing a new novel in October called Crossroads. So I'm hanging out for that, and no one will see me that day. Matt Syed is so good, Brett. Rebel Ideas is one of my favourite books of all time. He is brilliant, Matt Syed. Highly recommend. Stefan's also reading Atomic Habits by James Clear. Yes, that is in my bookshelf. It's extremely good. For those of you who haven't read that book, it's basically like do small things all the time, get big results. It's a good one. We've got someone reading a lot of historical books. Fantastic. Love that. Humans. Oh, yeah. That's great. Tom Pullman. Love that. And Lisa loved The Midnight Library as well. Isn't it great? It's so good. It is so, so good. If you haven't read The Humans, hard recommend. Really, really good. So we could talk books all day. And I would love to, because really books are probably my favorite thing in the world. Like if I had to choose between books, coffee, and my children, I'd be having a really tough time. because I love all of those things so much. And I think that books remain today still the most incredible invention. So even if you buy the book, even if you don't get it out of the library or borrow it from someone, for like $30 or $40, you can access a person's entire life's knowledge condensed into readable form and given to you. And then you can absorb that in a couple of days for $30 or $40. Like, books are everything. They're amazing. They're still the single best invention. Internet, meh, books, all about it. So, learn as read as a leaders or something like that? Yeah, all right, let's say that. Readers are leaders, which segues me into today's leadership conversation for you guys, which is all about performance. Right? So remember, we've moved quite methodically through our little wheel this week. We started with flexibility, which is at the core, right? That is our ability to cope with change and to move and adapt and stay flexible and agile and whatever buzzword you want in there as our context shifts. Because as we talked about a couple of days ago, the most useful frame for understanding our work and leadership now is not necessarily about character-led personality stuff. It's not necessarily about plot-led, the conditions that we create, but it's about our capacity to respond to context. It's the arena-led story. And if we're not tapped into that and moving with that, we get into trouble. So we want to be aware. We want to have a strong sense of agency, and we want to build our capacity for true resilience, which isn't about bouncing back, but about growing because of change, not in spite of it. Right? So flexibility, we touched that first. And we've also noticed that each day, those threads around self-efficacy and awareness and thinking and questioning are filtering into all of the other capability areas, which is why it sits at the core. Then we talked about decisions, which we understand now is not about what we think or what we know, but about how we think and the process that we use to understand our environment, to consider our options, and to take the smallest possible step to try it out. Now, I posted the day of the decisions live in the afternoon that we'd done exactly that, a case study in minimum viable decision making. We launched in a very soft and quiet manner this week, the Alicia Mackay Academy, which I'm so excited about, and I will put a link to that in the comments after this. But we launched that, and my initial desire and temptation was to launch all 20 courses that we've got in draft and to do it all at once and to do a big hurrah, right? Because I had gone over every last piece of the back end. I've gone through all the content. I've checked all the emails. I've checked all the settings. I've gone across all the pages. It should be ready to go. But the risk of doing that, right, the possibility of failure is magnified massively if we go and launch all those things at once, right? And if we go and launch it to the public, then we've got the potential to annoy thousands of people very quickly with just a minor flaw, right? So we moved into that process assuming there were things that we didn't even know we had wrong. We soft launched it to the Wednesday Wisdom crew, which is 5,000 of you guys. And we put just a few initial offers on there, a free one, a strategic planning fundamentals, and a meetings that matter, which I'm quite excited about, self-led meetings that matter curriculum, which is very, very cool. And we just put the 3 on there, and we said to everyone at the outset, hey, this is the beta version. It's the sneak peek. Go and have a squiz, but let us know what's wrong. And immediately, within an hour of the Wednesday Wisdom email going out, someone was like, says the registration's not allowed. Bam, first issue. There was a setting that we hadn't even been aware of in the back end that actually was prohibiting people from registering at all, right? So immediate fail, can't even register. Then the Wednesday Wisdom promo code wasn't working. And then we went in and tested one of the courses again and realized we didn't like how the certificate of completion looked, and, and so on and so forth. Because rather than approaching that as going, well, it's all perfect, it should be fine, and then being really upset when it isn't, and having some big hurrah launch and trying to do the whole thing, we knew, because we've done this kind of thing before, we knew it was going to be full of problems. Small problems, big problems, we weren't sure, but we knew there'd be something. And there was. In fact, there was like 5 things, and I can only assume, having now mentioned this publicly, that you guys are going to go to the academy, you're going to do the free course, because why not? And then you're going to send me emails and go, Alicia, there was a problem, and that's great. because it gives us the opportunity to try it out. And so we move into decision processes where we can, assuming we've got things wrong and being ready to tweak and move as we go, right? And that's cool. We love that. The next day, we talked about, I've just had a bunch of Academy registrations come in. Well done, team, but pay attention. You can do that afterwards. Yesterday, we talked about systems, and we talked about systems thinking and making work, right? So we came to understand that problems or challenges, gifts even, absolute gifts. Systems are about the way things fit together, right? So we had a really good stab at the common organizational model of establishing, 5 best practice business units led by 5 experts who then come together and kind of tacitly war for prestige and resources, but don't necessarily make decisions that benefit the whole, right? So the really popular analogy that came out of yesterday's session was around, we're architects when we're systems leaders, yeah? And we are thinking about how to build a great house, not how to build great rooms. And that needs to be the perspective that we bring to organizational challenges, because there is no such thing as a single crime. And if there is a problem somewhere, you best believe there is a root cause that is causing that same problem or a variation of it somewhere else, right? And we want to, as much as we can, interrogate the root cause, be very, very clear about what the consequences are, because they're not always what they first look like, and challenge the assumptions that sit underneath our programmed response to that, right? So we want to unpick our default. We talked about that yesterday. And to be quite clear, if we'd just managed that this week, if we'd covered off flexibility, we'd looked at how to enhance our decision process, we'd come to understand systems thinking, that would be a pretty big week. And I'd be pretty impressed with you guys. But are we going to leave it there? No, we're not going to leave it there. Live in lockdown, module 4, we are tackling performance today. Now, performance is not what we think it is. And I do want to say right at the outset that if you didn't attend last week's 3-part mini-series on living a strategic life, I would highly recommend you do that, because I'm not going to recover a lot of that today. And most of our performance module sits inside the 3 C's that we covered in last week's strategic life mini-series. Now, if you came to that last week and you can remember what the 3 C's were of living a more strategic life, I would love you to put that in the comments so that you can remind everybody else. So there's a lot of that. And I would recommend that you go and hit that up, because the things that it talks about in terms of being very clear about our focus and our priorities, achieving coherence by aligning the conditions to make that possible, and committing, right? I have just given away some of the 3 C's: clarity, coherence, and commitment. That's really core to performance. Ed remembers coherence. But what we get wrong about performance, there we go, everybody knows, clarity, coherence, commitment. You guys rock. That is fantastic. I love that. That is really cool, guys. Well done. You were definitely paying attention. The thing we get wrong about performance, I think, and this aligns to a story I've told myself a lot in my life and in my career, is that high performance is about working hard. It's about exertion. It's about working longer hours, being faster than everybody else, working harder than everybody else, pushing further. That performance requires you to go above and beyond, right? That the real high performance leaders are busy. They talk faster. They work faster. They push their people harder. They push themselves harder, right? That true professionals, true high performance have this back-breaking commitment. And I think that's reinforced by this really, I think, kind of dodgy brand of athletic-inspired motivational speaking that tends to happen at a lot of conferences and team things, where somebody who's devoted 5 years of their life to training 6 hours a day in their chosen sport stands on stage and they're like, you've got to swim every morning, and I did it, and I pushed harder, and I broke through, and you can do it too. Which is a load of shit, isn't it? Because you cannot be an Olympian. Sorry, team. Like, if you're already an Olympian, that's great for you. But most of us, we just can't be. And also, what a shitty way to think we have to live. That the only way to deliver good results that we feel good about that constitute performance are to put in some kind of Olympic effort. Like, that's dumb. I'm not a fan of that at all, because what that does is it basically counts most of us out, doesn't it? It says 1% of us can be high performers. Those of us who have the grit and the capacity and the willingness to sacrifice things in their life that they would otherwise have been investing in, can throw everything into work and be a success story and talk about it on stage in 10 years' time. And the rest of you, well, you can't be high performers because you just work like normal people and have well-rounded, fulfilling lives. Nah, fuck that. So I don't think you need to be some kind of Olympic high-performing, super moving, Bluetooth headset, fast-charging, mini-meeting person to be a high performer. And in fact, here's where it gets really interesting. That's not actually what high performers look like. So I'm going to provide a link in the comments after this live, but there was a really brilliant survey that was done a few years ago that tracked 1,000 chief executives, right, across some of the world's largest companies. So really, really large, big dollar enterprises. And the idea of the CEO study was to see how these people spent their time, because in terms of providing results, these were the people that had, it seemed, done the impossible, right? They'd either turned around large businesses or they had produced consistent value. And they went, okay, how are these people spending their time? And there are a lot of assumptions that went into that in early research. And it was based on a lot of the kind of Elon Musk model that we hear, right? Which is where Elon Musk quite famously talks about only sleeping, 3 hours a night. And if you want to get ahead, you got to work 20 hours a day and just... and what they found in the CEO study when they tracked how time was spent was completely upending all of those assumptions. So it turns out that the chief executives, the most successful chief executives, are the same people that consistently, almost without exception, exercise every day, right? So they've got an hour in their diary every day for exercising. They spend more time with their families and their hobbies than most middle managers, right? So they clock off earlier. They have more quality time with their family. Not only that, but at the start of each day, they tend to, right, on average, spend more time in a strategic capacity than you would expect. So there are a lot of people in there that don't take meetings or check their emails or pick up the phone until at least late morning, if not lunchtime, because they spend the first part of their day doing the important on the business stuff, right? And they slept an average of 7 to 9 hours a night, right? And so on and so forth. And so we're reading the CEO study going, that's interesting. The assumptions that we've got in popular culture and hustle culture about what it takes to be successful and a high performer aren't necessarily correct. And in fact, it's the people that can sustainably and consistently set up lives and businesses and organizations that will deliver success in a really sustainable pace, that in the long run have the edge. The people that can balance their work with their families and their hobbies and enough sleep and exercise and things they care about, because they keep showing up. They don't burn out. They just keep showing up, right? Day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, because they feel good, right? Work occupies a very appropriate space in their life and they feel good about it, and they don't lose their passion for it because they don't kill themselves in the process. And that is such a powerful thing for us to understand. Because my temptation has always been hustle culture, right? I'm driven by all these stories that are like, if you're not working hard, you're not working. And if you want to get what other people have got, you have to work twice as hard as they do. Go, go, go. If you really care about something, you'll push harder, you'll do more. And all it leads to, especially for me, is just burnout, right? I just swing between like lethargy and mania and then just feeling like shit. And it's entirely unhelpful. So actually, high performance is not a caricature. It is about balance. And it is about focus, right? It is about playing the long game, being very clear about what the long game is, and then working the medium term and the short game to fit that, right? So yesterday in systems, we talked about creating the conditions or creating an organizational environment that works without dependence on key people, without depending on people to go above and beyond or to work against the system. Performance is about being able to do that at a more micro level. So we want to be able to do that for ourselves and for our teams. Yeah. So what are the conditions that we work best under in our personal lives and our professional lives? And how can we build more of that in, right? And the pandemic has shown us how powerful it can be, right? When we're able to choose our own schedule and to work our life in a way that works for us. Some of us have realized that if we don't work in the morning, the afternoon sucks. So this is me. I often try and do homeschool in the morning with my children and work in the afternoon. And quite frankly, by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, my brain sucks. Yeah, I love working early in the morning, and I'm so much better off doing that than I am trying to do the afternoon. Other people have found the opposite, right? It might be that your ideal conditions for working are this: being at home with no distractions, being able to Zoom to someone if you need to, right? My middle child is absolutely thriving in online school. She loves it. She can quite happily break her day up between bouncing on the trampoline, having something to eat, talking to her friends, making a stop motion graphic thing she's been doing this week. It's been awesome. Whereas other kids immediately suffer without that direct peer contact and the regimented schedule of a teacher telling you what to do, right? So some of you, as soon as you go into lockdown, immediately feel depressed. You just hate it. Your sleep turns to shit. If you can't get on the train and go into town, you find it really hard, right? So we're all different. And being able to understand and work with those rhythms, not just at a personal level, but also understanding what creates the best conditions for our team is really important. And what both of those points come back to, if we think about flexibility again, is about the importance of agency, right? Because what we need here is total ownership and total autonomy, right? So we've accepted that the world around us has gone mad, and we've gone, okay, the world around us is mad. What is it that, from a medium and short-term perspective, we can take ownership of? What have we got the power to control? We can control how we work. We can control what we choose to put more of our energy, time, focus, and bandwidth into, and what we choose not to, right? We can take ownership of setting a quality standard, a bottom line for the things that really make a difference to us. And we can also take ownership of deciding to downgrade the quality of things that do not contribute to our performance, to our overall results, to the same effect, right? And there's a lot about that ownership thing that makes people really uncomfortable, because when you take absolute ownership for your own behavior and your own capacity to produce and perform, and when you enable, and this bit's really important, when you enable your team to take absolute ownership of their results and you give them the autonomy to produce and perform in a way that works for them in the conditions that you've set, quite magical things can happen. So in most of the research on delegation, the missing ingredient that that stops delegation from being effective is exactly that. It's the capacity for autonomy and ownership. So tell me if this sounds familiar. And oh my God, this sounds familiar to me, right? I'm going to delegate. I'm going to do a really good job of delegating because I need to get some stuff off my plate. So I'm going to get someone to do this for me. I'm going to give them some instruction about it, but I'm going to let them make it their own. So I'll be clear about the outcome. And I'm going to let them make it their own, because I know that that's the best way to delegate. They have to have some decision making about how it's carried out and just be clear on the outcome. I'm going to delegate this task. Oh God, they've made a mistake. Oh, I have to save it. Otherwise, everything's going to turn to shit. I'm going to look bad. They're going to look bad. Everything's going to suffer. Now that there's been a mistake made, I have to jump in. Does that sound familiar? Because that's how I operate. And that's how a lot of senior leaders I've worked with have operated. And it doesn't work, right? So the test of good delegation in a team is not how good you are at handing the task over. The test of good delegation is how good you are at responding at the first hurdle when things turn to shit. Because they will. When someone tries a new task, there's always a failure. There's a failure when you do it too. It's just that you feel better about it because that's inside your control, right? And so meaningful ownership and autonomy in the delegation space means allowing people to feel the consequences of their own mistakes and then to channel that into improving as they move forward. And man, that is so hard to do. It is so hard to do. But if you nail that, if you take absolute ownership for your role and you enable people to take absolute ownership for theirs, that's when magic things happen, right? That's when we get real performance in a team. But it's hard to do. All right. So yeah, absolutely. Ed's saying it's about empowering and trusting instead of control. And we talk about that, but it's bloody hard. It's really hard to do. It sounds nice until your neck's on the line or something's going to be late or your team's going to look bad. But if you don't enable people to suffer the consequences of that, they can't take ownership for the outcome. All right. So ownership is really important. Focus is extremely important. I bang on about this all the time. You can go back and watch the Strategic Life series to get some more on that. But unless we understand what the levers are that truly contribute to good performance in our lives and our teams and our organizations, and unless we channel more of our energy there than anywhere else, we're never going to get anywhere because the world is full of constant distractions, right? Emails pinging off, notifications on your phone, people walking in and having a problem. What about this? What about that? I've had another good idea. All right. So what most corporate organizations struggle with is not a lack of good ideas to make money. It's not a lack of innovation. It's initiative overload, right? It's a stretching of attention and time and energy and money because we're trying to diffuse it across too many things and we're all guilty of it. Right? Initiative overload is a more common problem in modern organizations than a lack of innovation. Right? It's diffused patchwork innovation rather than focused, targeted innovation. You know, it's like the how we've now got more obesity than hunger in the world. It's like that, but at a work level, right? We just have too much. And so our ability to know very clearly what actually drives performance matters. And in the book, we use quite an in-depth case study where we look at a university client that I worked with some years ago about how we identify intermediate levers of performance, right? And this is really important because I think if you've seen me do my strategy model before, you'll know I talk about how we spend a lot of time at the why, right? What's our big picture vision? What's our long term? And we spend most of our time at the what, which is the operational, day-to-day budgets, projects, getting things done. But we don't spend enough time at the how, which is what connects those two things. And the how is about the medium term and the intermediate levers, the intermediate benefits. And that's where true performance focus lies, right? It's being able to bridge the gap between where we know we want to be eventually and what we're doing today to focus our energy on what makes the most difference. So in the university case study, we'd looked at, okay, our big picture goals were about how we attract more students and how we improve conversion rates for interested students who want to enroll, right? And it was this big picture stuff. And that's really hard for teams to connect to, right? And I think there's a lot of you that this will immediately connect with. Trying to talk to your people about how they contribute up here is great in theory, but it's really hard in practice. So you, on Tuesday, are creating a more connected community. You're bringing people together and people are like, no, I just went to 2 meetings that took way too long and answered emails for the rest of the afternoon. I didn't connect communities at all, right? And so what we need is that connection piece in the middle that connects people's daily work to the big goal. So with the university, the big goal was conversion and retention, right? And by telling all the different departments to get ahead and do that, they were all firing off with initiative overload, doing all their own things, right? Running all of their own projects to try and make that happen. By interrogating the middle layer and trying to understand from a really factual perspective what the levers were that actually drove conversion and retention, both internationally, so big picture context, right, awareness, and for that university, we were able to narrow down on a couple of things, right? So we went, okay, there's a lot to do with the user enrollment experience here. So what we're realizing is that if enrollment is really easy from the beginning, if it's a really intuitive user experience, that's often enough to capture people who've kind of started and clicked on it. If it's great, they'll just continue, right? And if their application is turned around quickly, we've pretty much got them, right? So the impact of that, just the user experience for enrollment, is so high compared to all the other stuff, you know, the marketing and the customer service and all the other stuff that goes into it, the billboards, the promotion. If the user experience for enrollment is good, that trumps everything else in terms of a lever for what makes the difference. So actually, if we're trying to improve conversion and retention, rather than doing lots of different initiatives and boosting the advertising and getting more billboards and putting more people on the phones for customer service and putting on different courses and changing our programs and all the things we could do, if we channel all of our energy to improving the enrollment experience, we think that's our strongest lever at the moment. Not only is it the most useful lever for us to channel our attention to, and it worked, by the way, it also provides real clarity to all of our teams about what we're focusing on, right? We're going to make sure that we have got a kick-ass enrollment experience. And what that means for our students is that it's speedy, it's responsive, it's intuitive, right? It's easy for us to, once we've got our application in, it pings off automatically for scholarships that we are eligible for. And we've got a really fast response time on our application. And if there's any issues, we've heard about it quickly, right? The whole process is really easy. What can your team do and your department do to contribute to an awesome enrollment experience? Now that people can connect to, right? That people can understand where to channel their energy. And whatever that version of that is in our personal or professional lives, the big lever that makes all the difference, and taking the time to work out what that is and to map it and to look at data and to run some experiments, right? To have a think, what really makes the difference? It's like the old Pareto principle that 20% of our effort produces 80% of our results. Sometimes it's even more than that, right? And so having real clarity in your team, in your life, in your business about what the things are that actually make the difference. Maybe you're self-employed and one dinner meeting that takes 90 minutes has more of an impact on your bottom line for the quarter than a whole range of diffused online advertising and marketing promotion and sales and social media and email marketing, right? Maybe you're better off to try and land 3 dinners a month than you are to do all of that other stuff. You won't know unless you check, right? And so this is where performance becomes about being very aware of our results and what contributes to them and tracking that and putting bottom lines around it and having the confidence to get rid of the other shit, because that's the stuff that makes it hard for us to get anywhere, right? So performance is all about that medium-term game and having the confidence and the ownership to then make that possible, right? Knowing what our levers are, having the confidence in what makes the difference and focusing on that. Now, there's a whole lot more that we can talk about with this stuff. And again, I absolutely recommend you watch last week's series on clarity about the big picture, coherence around how our lives run, and commitment to the big game. So Diane's asking, is this the same as identifying the root cause of the problem and focusing on that? It's kind of the opposite, actually. It's about identifying what the levers are that produce benefits rather than the root cause of a problem, right? So it's what's the thing that we do or can do that makes the most difference to our big picture outcomes, right? So Richard Branson in Virgin has realized that the happier his staff are, right? The happier his staff are, the better their sales are, right? Like there's a profit logic chain that goes, if I look after my people in my industry, that has the biggest contribution to our bottom line success. And if I just pour all of my energy into that, it's going to pop out the other end, right? There's a profit logic model in there. Whereas if you're a bank or a finance company, what they've realized in their profit logic chain is that if they look after their biggest and best customers, right, if they can improve the way they hold on to their existing customers, that's significantly more profitable than trying to attract new ones, right? So pouring their energy into VIP clients is the lever that produces the most benefits. And that depends on your industry, right? It depends on what you're doing, what your work is, where you are. But unless you know where most of that benefit comes from, you're in trouble. So it's kind of the opposite. It's rather than identifying the root cause of problems, which we've talked a lot about, it's finding the levers of performance. So I'd love to know in the comments what your levers are or what you think your levers are, right? What do you notice that when you spend energy there, the payoff is so much higher than when you spend it somewhere else? Maybe it's relationship building, right? Maybe it's nurturing existing customers. Maybe it's spending time with your most vulnerable or complex cases, if you're in a community environment, rather than the big picture, right? Rather than everybody else. So you tell me. I can't tell you what your levers are and what your biggest value producers are. Only you can. But unless you take the space to figure it out, you're not going to know. All right, team. We are reaching the end again. Why does this go so fast? of our mini series today on Not an MBA. Now, we have covered flexibility, we've talked about decisions, we've cruised through systems, and now we've taken a stab at hustle culture and talked about true performance, which is about laser focus and understanding what makes the difference, taking ownership of your role and seizing what creates the most value. Now, obviously, there is so much more in it than that. But if that's what you take away, then that is absolutely worth your time in part 4 of this mini series. Now, tomorrow is the final installment of our 5 parts, right? So we are talking about influence tomorrow. We're talking about how you take your ideas and you leverage them to have impact at scale by taking other people on a journey with you. Now, you will be unsurprised to learn that I have a mildly controversial take on this one too, as does tend to be my way. So I'm really looking forward to talking influence with you guys tomorrow. Loving seeing your comments come up in the chat now. So we're seeing that actually for Lisa, it's the one-on-one time with her team that seems to make the most difference to building her effectiveness in her team, right? So it's the one-on-one time rather than the team meeting time that brings the most value. That's great. Rachel says that actually being present makes a massive difference to her, right? If she can actually just focus without all the distractions, she has a potent use of a small amount of time. Totally get that. I really get that, Rachel. That's great. For David, it's telling great stories and emotionalizing the goals. Yeah, so spend less time making the posters and writing the convincing reports and doing all the things if what seems to make the most difference is just telling a bloody good story. In fact, pair a beer with it, mate. Then you're really onto a winner. All right, team, you have been fantastic. Training and enablement, Ed, absolutely. Time invested in training. And again, this is different across different industries. What the ROI for training in some spaces is really low. People spend a fortune on training their staff and it gets them nowhere. In other spaces and for other specific capabilities, investing in training makes a massive difference to performance and results. And unless you track it and interrogate it and find out, you don't know. So many of us are out there doing things that we think will make a difference. I'll update my website. I'll send my people on productivity training. We'll start a new thing. We'll put in a new CRM. Well, right, and it's just, it's this and it's that and it's something else. You don't know. You don't have a good baseline. You're not tracking that information to see the difference that it's making. And it's all guesswork. And eventually, it's initiative overload. Right? And so we want laser targeted focus based on good information about what makes the difference in your life and for your teams and for your organization. All right. Thank you very much for coming along again today. I'm going to go and enjoy reading in my window seat. Thank you, Rachel. And I hope that you guys are enjoying whatever you're doing before we tune in for the announcement this afternoon from the Prime Minister. I will see you back here Saturday morning, 9 a.m. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Thank you so much. Ka kite.